Welcome to another edition of the Bandwagon podcast. And as you probably realized, I have a theme that I go through. One of the areas that where my heart lies is around sort of the whole field of substance misuse or substance use or whatever you want to, whatever definition, identity that you want to give it. And it's important in terms of to highlight those people, those individuals who've made a real impact on my career, who helped me out when when I first started in there, because ultimately those people who I've come in contact with and helped, their knowledge and their teachings are kind of passed on through them. And one of those guys that who really helped me out a lot and I learned a lot is kindly joining me today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Luke Trainor. Luke, how are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. Good to see you, Ricky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a long while. You're too famous now for to kind of remember and
Not quite, mate.
Get in contact with me. How's things anyway? How is life treating you at the moment?
It's good, Ricky, man. It's good. So professional life is good. Family life is good. A lot of big change from perhaps when I saw you last. That's for sure. So yeah, man, there's a lot going on, getting involved in research, stuff at the university. So that's exciting stuff, mate. Yeah.
So I want to kind of work backwards in some way.
Yeah.
So I just want to kind of just to kind of show the journey in terms of doing this, and I wanted to share this experience with a lot of people out there because you're so unique in your way. You're unique in your own story in that, but however, the story is so common, and the way it's articulated is very important, because to have that, how do I say, having the right kind of pitch and tone is important from this. So, can you just tell us a little bit of the program that you're in now? So it's Better Than Well, and it's based at it's the recovery program at University of Birmingham.
That's right.
So can you just tell everybody what that's about, please?
Sure. So it's called, the Americans would call it a collegiate recovery program, which is not, the kind of vernacular we have in the UK. That's not really a thing. Collegiate is not really used very often. So, I call it a kind of campus recovery program. Now, in America, these have been actually kind of really prominent since the 1970s, going all the way back. I think the first one was in New Jersey. There's been a lot of prominent ones. They have ones now in America. There's Texas Tech one has a whole separate campus and housing and amenities for recovery community. So they're kind of way ahead of the curve, as they often are with recovery. I think in the UK, recovery as a concept, as you know, was kind of from 2008 onwards kind of mired in the problems of definition and all sorts of stuff. So there was a whole different experience of addictions recovery in the UK, I think. But we are, we're not the first. We are the first that are integrated fully into the university structure in Europe, let alone in the UK. And that was basically started because I arrived at university myself very much after I'd just kind of come out of a treatment stint. I'd been homeless before that, and I landed at a Russell Group university. Incredibly proud of my achievements and really excited about my future. But I didn't really want to disclose anything about my own addiction, that I was in recovery, or very much of my past, really. So I'd come up with kind of novel excuses every time someone asked me, why are you studying at, what was 37, 38 years old? I'd say anything but addiction, really. Interestingly, I was more comfortable to say that I'd suffered complex mental health needs than addiction, which tells you something, really, doesn't it? That how comfortable are we as a society to discuss addiction?
Anyway, wouldn't they be linked anyway?
Yeah, I mean, they're very much linked anyway. But I think that I've reflected on it, obviously, and I think that what it is there's the obvious connection with criminality based on the war on drugs. Obviously, you know, that stigmatizes users from day one, really. And then there's something about the admitting that you can't control something, and the fact that it's not really seen in terms of an illness so much as it's seen as a moral failing, and that you're very impulsive, you can't control yourself, and you could go off at any minute. I think there's something in that as well. But I bumped into Dr. Ed Day, who you know well, on campus. Obviously, he's got his kind of research work here, and he hadn't seen me in a long time. He was very surprised to see me. I think the last he'd heard, I'd gone completely off the radar, as I tended to do, with kind of Class A IV use and all that comes with that. And he introduced me to the idea of collegiate recovery. He said, well, actually, there's campuses all over America where recovering people come together. They all look a bit different in each city, but there is the kind of blueprint there to create something, and that's what we set about doing. And there was a lot of time in development, and then getting buy-in from the university was obviously going to be the major hurdle, which Ed did the majority of. He could speak in those kind of boardrooms in a way perhaps that I wasn't quite ready to, and he got that buy-in almost at top level, at vice chancellor type level, and yeah, the rest is kind of history. We're now been operational for the best part of a kind of almost a full academic year. We've got 30 students that have engaged with us, which is far transcends what we thought we would get in our first year. Of those 30, 15 are like fully engaged core members, turn up to groups all the time. We have smart recovery on campus. We have a kind of 12-step meeting on campus where various members of 12-step fellowships come and share their experience, strength and hope. We have Buddhist monks teaching us meditation and Dharma studies. So there's a Buddhist chaplain here, a lovely guy called Lau, and he comes once a month to teach mindfulness of breathing, walking meditation, and some Dharma studies. We have your kind of recovery celebration group at the end of the week. It's growing all the time. So yeah, that's kind of collegiate recovery, mate.
No, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. Just to see. Before we kind of carry on your little, I just want to give a bit of a head nod to Dr. Ed Day. That guy is, especially in the kind of the addiction field in the UK, he is a real fundamental pillar in instigating change and in education and getting it on academic level. Really important. So having a person like that to kind of push this agenda forward was massive.
Huge. Yeah, agreed, man. Yeah,
good guy. So yeah, and I'm somehow, I tried to get him on a drugs conferences a couple of times, but I'll definitely pin him down now. After getting him,
he's about two offices down from me, so I can.
yeah. You got to get him. Yeah. So, Luke, you can obviously see where this is going. It's going to go back from, and then where how we meet and stuff. Like,
yeah.
You come from a very successful family, and who have achieved massive and great things, especially for the city and the area. How did you find yourself in a position of where the addictions actually came under footsteps? Because I always remember something that you said to me first is like, nobody chooses to go down the field as nobody chooses to be a drug addict when they're younger. It's just the circumstances of life and choice that navigate you into that scenario. What was those scenarios that navigated you down that life? Because you've got everything, you had a secure family, you got success there, and
Yeah.
But you went down on a slightly different pathway.
Yeah. You know, I reflect on this a lot, Ricky. Yeah, I came from a very well-respected family, obviously kind of political ties and stuff, going back quite a long way, always involved. You know, our house was like a kind of Labour Party hub when I was growing up, and every other kind of, you know, women's liberation movement, various different, you know, political movements being run from out of the house, really. So always good people around me, good, strong ethics, moral values, not really religious, but that was kind of replaced by very strong social justice beliefs. So it's almost the same thing, you know, you have something that grounds you in you know, belief for justice and things like that. It was a big family and it was a busy household, and I honestly think that for most of the people in that family, it suited their personalities. They liked that about it. They liked that it was dynamic, that when you went downstairs, you weren't sure. There was always some interesting characters talking about political things or whatever. For me, personality-wise, I was a sensitive kid, Ricky. You know, I was shy. I was a little bit introverted, quite a lot introverted, and it didn't suit me all that well. And I would disappear into imagination and escapism long before I ever picked up a drug. Not in a necessarily pathological way, I don't think. I like books and I like to kind of imagine things, fantasy, all of those kind of things. You know, there's a lot of people like that. It doesn't mean that they end up like I did, really. But I think that I had two older brothers and they were quite a lot older. And so they were teenagers when I was about 10, 11. And I was a very curious kid that could, you know, make up scenarios in his head. And that was at the time that they were at secondary schools in Birmingham in the early 90s. You know, they were in bands. There was had an exciting lifestyle. Me, the fantasist, had already kind of painted the picture of what their lifestyle was before I'd even got involved in it. And I imagined, you know, how rebellious it was and how amazing and all these new experiences. So before I ever kind of got involved in that, I was fascinated by the alternative lifestyle that it offered. There was some trauma that happened. You know, I think that kind of probably had something to do with that jump from it just being a kind of healthy fascination into I think later on it was a bit of a kind of schema that grew into wanting to change my experience. I started young, that's the truth. And I think if you look at a lot of the research into this, if you got started young and you go on to have problems with addiction, then you've got far more likelihood of being a kind of the deeply ingrained type of addict that we maybe see in those kind of harm reduction services and stuff. You know, that if you got going early, that's a pretty good indicator. And I did, you know, I was by the age of 14, I'd been kicked out of 3 schools already. I wasn't a violent young man. I wasn't a particularly, you know, dangerous in any way. I was just non-compliant, and I was using drugs on a daily basis. At that time, I was drinking, I was smoking hash, and I was taking amphetamines almost daily. They were available.
You had a good go then, didn't it?
Oh, did you? Yeah. I got to go in. Yeah.
So you got 3 schools. You're bouncing off the walls, let alone just on the amphetamines alone.
Yeah, and I was, I was kind of. I think I used to. There was something about. I mean, it's funny that they give people with ADHD Ritalin. Yeah, and I do think that I was able to concentrate better when I was on speed, but just not on the right things. I just wouldn't concentrate on.
Because I remember when we delivering the drug. Well, when we used to deliver the drug and alcohol training, which was like not. Yeah. I've got to give a kind of a disclaimer. We weren't doing the drugs and alcohol ourselves. We were like, it was awareness training, it was education, harm reduction, and things. I just want to go through. You said a couple of interesting things there. One of the things that was around trauma, and there's extremely high statistics in terms of saying that the majority of kind of addictions that people fall into is for some kind of trauma. In your experience, would you back that, or would you say that's true?
I think you can't escape it. And when you do kind of talk qualitatively or get experience from people that have run into real problems with addiction, it comes up a lot. I do tend to think of addiction as it's very multifaceted, and that's putting it lightly, really. It transcends a lot of boundaries between the psychological, the biological, the social, and the spiritual, however you want to see that. And it doesn't sit neatly anywhere in particular across those things, really. But trauma does seem to be something which can kind of trigger a response that comes up time and time again in life, where you're pushing away bad experiences. And if you talk to someone who gets into real problems with addiction, what kind of quite often marks them out from someone who just takes too many drugs is this unique thing that they're pushing away experience, and they've learned to do that with substances, usually a progression of substances or poly drug use, always trying to find that Goldilocks just right combination of substances that will alleviate their feelings of discomfort.
And do you think that the drug of choice almost kind of personifies what they're feeling at that time? Because it's like you've just gone through a concoction, you've gone through you've gone through brews, amphetamines. You'll get quite a lot of people just kind of specializing in one kind of drug. But I always used to find that polydrug use was standard anyway. I used to find that, but to go. You used to know the difference between somebody who's kind of just a standard kind of user, and I'm using these labels as going against what I actually believe about labels. But then you used to get some people who are real connoisseurs of drugs who'd be able to kind of pick you and be able to kind of say, yeah, this is what. And I always found those guys some of the most enlightened, the most educated, but some of the hardest clientele groups to work with.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and you get there's an interesting kind of increase in that these days. I mean, some of the students on campus that we see that are buying their drugs off the dark web that haven't gone down the kind of usual, going down to Ladywood or Lazelle's to score. These are a very different group of kind of
the e-drug user.
Yeah, the psychonauts. And they often end up in a fair bit of trouble because. Imagine that kind of accessibility where you're just there with an Amazon menu of a pharmacopoeia of drugs, and it is interesting. Yeah, they can land themselves in a fair bit of trouble. I think just trying to find that sweet spot of combinations of drugs or find these new novel drugs out there. I think I was one of those perhaps before there was such a thing as the dark web, but I did my network of drug supplies was very diverse. It wasn't just one, I was getting kind of acid from old hippies in Moseley, and able to get cocaine from lads, usually kind of more towards Solihull way. There was a wide variety of substances on offer, but you had to kind of travel around for them then. And yeah, it was always combinations of drugs for me. Just opiates on their own wasn't really sufficient. I'd need some stimulant with that. Again, I was always trying to find some kind of sweet spot of no self, actually, and just not feeling self. Self was uncomfortable for me. The feeling of this construct of kind of self was, I was at odds with it in many ways. And actually the solution to my addiction has been to search for other methods of no self through meditation and things like that.
So you talked about when you were at school, and the common kind of first drugs that people use at school is normally alcohol and cigarettes, and then we come on to the subject around the gateway theory and all this thing.
Yeah,
I'm not going to presume your feelings and stuff like that, but I want you in your kind of experience and your life journey and working with people, your views on that, on having the gateway theory of people go to, if you do this, it will almost automatically escalate you up to using harder drugs.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think if there's any drug that teaches us how to be an addict from a young age, it's nicotine. That's the first drug that a person will usually be able to say, I need it on a daily basis. I feel bad without it. I need to get a packet of cigarettes, or I need to bum a fag off someone on the way to school or whatever. So our experiences of addiction probably start more with something like nicotine.
I got one better for you, What about sugar?
Sugar? Yeah, man. Yeah, you're right. A stage before that, I used to pinch money for sweets, I did, and that went on to be a definite.
But don't you feel like I used to sit back, and I got it from my mate basically what he used to do. And the same way he used to fiend over getting like his fags on the way to school.
Yeah,
it's the same way as when he used to get his sweets. Exactly what you said. But then when I'm looking at kids now, when I used to go into schools and I used to see the same thing over energy drinks.
Yeah.
And I think that, just I'm speaking like a parent or anything. I think there is a whole different kind of market around addiction now in terms of energy drinks, gaming, in-app purchases of gaming.
Yeah.
You're seeing that consumerism. Yeah. It's got, we just talked about the dark web and how people are buying their drugs at the same time. For me, it's like access is a thing. It's like you can't stop access. Well, you can educate people to make the right informed choices. But then you've got gambling, you've got all these other things coming up on the increase, and that social kind of education is not necessarily there. But then you've got this biological need that you're pumping kids from a young age full of sugar, Haribo's, energy, Red Bull, Monster, and all this stuff. It's just like, and then you see like, I don't, I'm with you. You ain't gonna, not everyone's gonna bloody end up from having a Red Bull to heroin. But I think what there is just there needs to be a healthy discussion about something at least.
Yeah, I think we live under a economic and political system, roughly kind of called neoliberalism, really, which is capitalism essentially, and that relies upon a certain kind of mentality in the consumer in order to keep the whole system aloft. And the market has remarkable amount of power. I mean, we grew up when there was like social democracy, and there was actually, the state were involved in decisions, whether or not you agreed with them always, there was strong state structures. Now the marketplace is such a dominant, powerful thing that it pushes aside most concerns that citizens might have about the way things are going, and it just absolutely floods it. Yeah,
the government's buying the stock.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it is a weird one. I mean, like, you know, like your drug control, your amphetamines. I'm guessing at your school you would have been an outliner there. There wouldn't be that many people on that.
No, there wasn't. There wasn't really anyone. I think there were. It was at a time where, you know, the kind of the ecstasy boom was starting to happen. I wasn't old enough at that point really to be part of that first kind of summer of love and all of that that was going on. So there were kids that used to talk about their brothers taking ecstasy and stuff like that, and some of them perhaps might have even been able to get bits of speed. But this is the thing, you see, I took it on an almost daily basis, and it wasn't even really recreational. A lot of the recreational stuff was going on as well, but I didn't tell the friends that I used recreationally with at the clubs, at the raves, and you know, taking kind of acid with. I didn't tell them about my life as the person that during the week couldn't really cope with his feelings, couldn't cope with himself very well. They didn't know about that. They didn't really know about it until I properly hit the deck on heroin and crack, and then they were like, wow, that seemed to happen really quickly. And of course, I was the only person that knew, nah, this has been building up. You know, I was stealing benzos off my granddad from the age of about 14 as well. You know, he was an alcoholic who just stopped. He lived in our house with us. And he just stopped the medical route. He just went to the doctor quite late in his life, and the doctor said, okay, here's a load of Valium, basically. Yeah. And I used to pinch those. So there was a real addictive kind of schema building in me from a young age. You know, why is that? Is it in some way genetic? My granddad was an alcoholic. There's a fair bit of alcoholism in the family going back. Could it be that? Probably a little bit of that. Could it be some of the social stuff? Yeah, no doubt. The psychological stuff and the trauma, yeah, probably had something to do with it. It all kind of comes together, doesn't it? And it comes together in different people in different ways, I think. But yeah.
And then at the time, as you're growing up, when did you realize yourself that, hang on a second, I'm in a bit of trouble here?
Yeah, early on, Ricky. Early. I went to, you might even remember this, not a lot of people do, probably one of the first drug services in Birmingham behind Cars Lane Church, drug line.
Yeah.
This little door you knocked.
It was a red door, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was the red door. So they used to open. They used to. Is that where Turning Point? I don't know whether they changed.
I don't know if there's anything there anymore, but it was called. I think it was called Drugs Line or something then.
And it was just the red door opened, and then they used to open the door, and they just to see what was in front of them at that time.
Yeah. That was pretty much it, man. And that was what kind of frontline services were. I think they had the ABC, the Addictive Behaviour Centre in town as well, but that tended to be for people who were quite entrenched in heroin addiction or whatever. So I turned up there as a 15-year-old lad. I did realise that I used drugs and alcohol differently from the people around me. And I had a girlfriend at the time who told me as much. She was like, it's not normal. I let her into my life enough for her to be able to see how I was using. And I wasn't going to school at this point. I wasn't even going to the kind of reform type school that they put me in. And I was just drinking and taking drugs day in, day out at this point, at the age of 15. Bless them, down at that drug service. They gave me a cup of tea. They listened to me. They gave me some leaflets and stuff. But there wasn't a lot they could do for me. there wasn't really such a thing as youth addiction services. I don't even really think there is today, mate. You know, it's not a massively well.
But your family, like, or your family, you just said were activists, and they kind of foresee new social movements and stuff. Were they seeing this in the house as well? Were they trying to accommodate, or were you just keeping it so secretive that displaying it outside of it?
Again, my sister, you know, she knew. She was, you know, she's a very smart one, and she was kind of around.
She ain't done too bad right now.
No, she's done all right. Yeah. And she was kind of.
I'll just tell everyone at this bit. It's Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips.
That's
MP.
right. Yeah. So she was in, you know, similar social groups, but not, you know, the same. So she kind of knew how. I think she knew how my friends and I outwardly used, but again, she didn't so much know that secret bit that I kind of kept ticking along. I don't think I really revealed that to anyone apart from that girlfriend at the time. My parents were I definitely don't want to give to make it look like they didn't care or that they didn't try and do anything. They did, you know, they were very open-minded about that. They couldn't really understand, you know, why it was so different from my brother's experiences, because they're, you know, smoking a bit of weed and going out, and that was all sweet, you know, there was no problems with that. They were getting on with what they needed to do. But I don't think they probably just thought that there was other stuff going on for me, behavioural stuff and other stuff, as is often the case, because you didn't really talk about those things in the way that we do today, I think, you know.
But do you think that parents actually speak to people about those conversations? Because those conversations should be happening from the birth of time, and the human race has been trying to get off its face for fucking years, and you know what I mean. It's nothing new, but those ingredients to speak at a table where you've got, you know, when you talk about trust, love, all these kind of things, regardless of what the subject matter is, that you need that core ingredients there. And for some people, those key ingredients are there, but they just don't know how to raise a subject. They just don't know how to talk about it. They can talk about everything else, but when it comes down to that, you know, on certain subjects, you know, they freeze up. There's no instruction guide of how to be a parent. There's no instruction guide of how to raise a conversation to a point. And if it's a completely alien, different world, there'll be people listening to this or watching this going, you know, I'm a parent. I've got a young kid. I'm gonna have to have that conversation at somewhere. Where do I get that information from?
Yeah.
And there wasn't a YouTube there where you can find out how to do it.
No. I think it's you know, for my dad especially, it was difficult for him to kind of measure that, you know, being a protective, authoritative figure against, like, allowing me to speak and say what I needed to say. You know, I've got two boys now myself, so I'm kind of I'm starting to realize some of these things about parenthood, for sure.
And then as you're growing up, as you're getting older and older, going into kind of thinking about employment and stuff, you know, how difficult was it to deal with the kind of stigma that was around at that time, especially?
So I guess when I did I ever really think about employment? There was bits of employment along the way. I suppose at the time in my life when I met you, I'd moved on to heroin and crack, you know, before that, and I had I'd kind of realised that that's not what I wanted to be in my life, and there was a kind of burgeoning movement at that time. In fact, funnily enough, I've got the mug that I have is from Points.
You know, I remember sitting next to you one day when you're coming in, and I was writing up this course, and you were asking me, you're like, "Oh, Rick, what's that about?" And you know, the way that the style that used to be is like very You know, when you talk about introvert, like this is amazing to see you like this. When it was back in there, like it was hard to get a sentence out.
Painful, yeah.
and we used to sit next to each other every day. And I remember when I was writing this course about, I think we were just doing something about heroin withdrawal of all this, and I was like, you have that imposter syndrome, and I was constantly saying, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm here. I'm not about a user experience. I'm here trying to educate, you know, because you do get that, you know. And then I used to have that validation of like, well, you know, if you're in the NHS, a doctor doesn't necessarily have cancer to treat cancer patients and all.
Yeah.
And then you started this story. You said, "Oh, Rick, I just come back from Thailand," and I just thought, and that's when I realized, I like, there is another level to this shit. If you can you just tell me about your experience of when you went to Thailand to try and your rehab bit?
Yeah, so I went to a place called Wat Tam Krabok, which is in the Lopburi area of Thailand. It's become quite famous, but at the time it was massively obscure, and I got the same reaction from quite a lot of other people before I went. You know, I'm going to go and try and kick heroin in a Buddhist monastery in the jungle, and they were like, "You what? You're going to do what?" And I went there, and I literally just I landed in Bangkok. I had a friend in Bangkok who I couldn't make it to the monastery because I'd been withdrawing from heroin all the way on a flight, including stopping at Abu Dhabi on the way to change, and that was traumatic. So when I got to Bangkok, I just sang some rum and sent my friend off to go and get whatever pharmaceuticals she could from the local pharmacies, and then just, I think, slept for 3 days. And then she put me in a taxi, fed up with me, and just sent me off to this monastery. A monastery is not like a building. It's like a village, almost like a town, to be honest with you. It's a whole community. The monks there have historically been taking people in because it's not far from the Golden Triangle. So they've always had waifs and strays, smugglers and people who have ended up in trouble and had to go into the monastery to kick heroin. You know, there's a lot of heroin around there. And I got there, and they have this very kind of bizarre ritual, and this belief that if they purge you massively fast with this foul concoction of jungle potion, that it'll get rid of your heroin. It'll make your heroin withdrawal really quick, which it does. But it's like 2 days of the most traumatic, intense hell that you can imagine. So they give you this monk comes around, and he gives
how did you get into, like, how did you get the admission bit? So they found, like, you're walking at this, and how you do? My name's Luke, or what?
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much, man. There was a guy called Prayat, and they're not like, you know, you think Buddhist monk in your mind, you think like gentle, compassionate, loving, and kind of meditating all the time. These guys were hard bastards, man. They were more your kind of Shaolin monk style dudes, man. And he cavity searched me straight away, because I just landed. They had people who had organizations in mainly kind of Germany and Switzerland and places like that would link you up to this place. I didn't do any of that. I just landed there with like one bag. All right, how you doing? I've come from Birmingham. And they were like, we don't know who you are. So they cavity searched me and put me in this this kind of hall where there was just, you know, it must be about 50 rattling junkies in there. And you had to fight for a mattress on the first night. It was
like a full-on punch-up.
There was punch-ups. I didn't get involved, but the Thais were happy to punch each other up. So I went through that purge, and true to the word, you know, my rattle was done in 3 days, man. But it was, I can't even read. All I can remember is like they kind of have drums beating in the background when you took the horrible foul potion.
Do you know what was in there?
No, to this day I don't, and I don't think that they reveal it. I think, you know, literally just like mad stuff crushed down from the jungle. probably bits of kratom and stuff like that, I think. But it just instantly, the minute it hit your mouth, really, your throat, you just, from both ends. So it gets it out of your system quickly.
Like I need to know, like, for this bit, so apologies, like, what was the hygiene and the other levels around, like?
Just awful. I got hepatitis A there. There was no hygiene whatsoever. There were, people. I mean, if you look at it through a COVID lens now, it was just completely. There was puke and blood. Like, the monks used to all use the same razor to shave their bald heads on a full moon night. And bearing in mind that a lot of the monks were ex-street heroin users, honestly, mate, it just sends shivers up your spine thinking about the hygiene in the place. Yeah, man.
And then,
yeah.
Oh, fuck. And then, so you a rattle in itself, like, if you look and you read about it, is it's being suggested that it's kind of like, think of the worst flu that you've ever had, and times it about 5.
Yeah, it's about right.
And yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And so you're in that condition, you're puking and shitting like constantly.
Yeah.
And then when do you, and I'm guessing at this point you're completely out of it, or do you still have a recollection of how you were during that period?
Yeah, no, I'm completely out of it. I've got hazy recollections, but no, I couldn't really tell you what occurred in those 3 days. No, I can remember a kind of a pain and a discomfort, but I can't remember specifics at all.
I'm getting these memories back from when you told me the story the first time, and I think I could see. I remember. I remember you just sitting there, your head to the ground and laughing and telling me, and I was like, I just, you have that imposter syndrome. It kicked in big time, because then you, and then you said, like, what your day one? How long did you stay there in total?
I was there for more than a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, after I'd come through the purging part of it, I kind of came round on a beautiful monastery in the jungle, fresh and full of daisies, and it was a bit of a mad program they had there. So you had to be up at 4:30 in the morning, and then you had to sweep the monastery in silence for 2 hours, bearing in mind that a monastery in a jungle, sweeping leaves is completely pointless. It will just fall back down as you're doing it. But that was part of the like, to teach you that you can't control everything, and that you will never be able to completely sweep away everything in your life. You've got to put up with certain. There was some intelligence behind their program and some wisdom. You could only eat once a day, and you ate at 7:30 after sweeping and meditation. And the food was fucking amazing, as you can imagine, like properly nice Thai food. But then you had to wait for 7:30 for your next food. You could drink water throughout the day. But there was so much of it I loved. There was a lot of wildlife. There was like flying squirrels and
any snakes.
Big snakes, man.
Wow,
there was a big old python that I didn't realize this about pythons, but the monks were like, that's where the python lives. Like, as if the python's got like a whole kind of territory. And sure enough, man, if you went into this particular little bit, this enclave, you're gonna see this big python. It's like that's his neck of the woods, man. It was
what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like,
I thought if you're gonna see a snake, you happen to see a snake in the jungle. But it was like his territory. That was like, he had a little part where he lived, this python.
And Like, I'm not saying like a dog. It used to come up. Like, would it travel towards you and shit?
No. I'm saying that if you went into, it was like a little enclave.
Yeah. I got you.
If you went in there, you'd be sure to see it. It wasn't like a chance encounter. It's like it lived in that part of the monastery.
And what about like I've been to Thailand. What about the king cobra? You didn't have anything like that coming into your rooms or nothing? Oof.
Yeah, king cobra tends to be more in the paddy fields, in the rice fields. It's more of an agricultural creature, whereas in this was thick jungle, man. The cobra's more on the flats and the
any dangerous animals around you.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, there was these I used to see the toys when we were, because I moved from that, all living in the kind of bit where you do the rattle into a smaller place with just 4 of the guys, and they were toy guys and they were really lovely, but these green snakes used to come into our quarters sometimes and they'd just kick them out or get a brush and brush them out, and I just ended up doing the same thing because I thought
venomous. Were they venomous?
When I got back to the UK and I looked on the internet, it was the 6th most venomous snake in the whole fucking world, and I'd just been kicking these things out of the room, like, because I saw the toys do it. But yeah, it's called the green crate or something like that.
What the?
Yeah, man, it was a mad experience. I think actually when it taught me something about addiction, that while I was there, I got really into Buddhism. My well-being was excellent, meditating daily. But on the day that I left there, pretty much the day, and I kind of convinced them to allow me to leave on false pretenses. I'd said, my girlfriend needs me or whatever. And
they didn't want to let you leave.
They didn't know, out of compassionate reasons, I think, because they just didn't see that the work had been done, because I was still trying to manipulate. I was still kind of trying to get out of there all the time, but doing it by lying and stuff. And they have this notion of correct speech. It's very important in Buddhism. So they could see that I was full of shit, really. And when I left, I got back into Bangkok and I'd relapsed within the space of a day, man, on booze. I hit the booze hard, man.
What I know this is a silly question, but why?
This is what I mean. It taught me something about addiction. I think quite often, if you have too much of a trauma focus or too much of an anything focus, we miss a lot in addiction. Because my experience talking to addicts all the time, or people with substance use disorders or alcoholism, I should say, that it isn't as simple as saying, something bad happened to me, or I was all in my stuff, I was depressed, and I picked up to push away the experience. Because I've met people, and I've been a person who's just relapsed incomprehensibly for no particular reason, with no identifiable trigger. I've heard people who have been 3-4 years in recovery that have got the job that they always wanted, had a glass of champagne to celebrate, 2 days later in a crack house. I've heard it all. So it's really, when I ask myself, you just had all this spiritual goodness, this well-being, and you leave the monastery and you pick up, what were you thinking? It's part of what I suffer from, I think, is that I can change my experience of the world in the blink of an eye and almost forget that I can't use drugs like other people.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want to ask. I weren't asking why in a ignorant point. It was from the point of saying that's your stock is at the highest. You've literally just come out.
Man.
Your resilience is at the peak, and for you to go out to that bit, it could be that complacency. It could be something in there that I've mastered it and done that. That in itself was kind of a life-changing experience. But did you, from going into the criminality side of stuff, so you've got the spiritual and that and the other side of it, was there any a situation when you're trying to score drugs or anything like that was you know, where you realize, oh shit, I'm in a bit too deep here, or like you got a situation when you're trying to buy that, you think, oh fuck, I'm about to die?
Yeah, I can remember one moment very vividly, and I shared on it in a mutual aid group actually just last week. When I first kind of got going with crack cocaine, you know, it was back when there actually were crack houses. These days, it's entered the vernacular, and what people say when they mean crack house is actually just a place where there's unwell people using drugs, and we use it like, oh, it's a crack house down the road. But when I got started, there were actual yardie run crack houses in Ladywood and Handsworth and the Zells. And I was in one. I was, you know, I only just got going with crack really. And a guy who'd just got out of prison and didn't like the proprietor, let's say, of the crack house, kicked the door off, and he was an absolutely huge man. He had a machete. I was sat doing my thing with a glass table in front of me. He walked in the room and just landed down the machete on the glass table. It shattered everywhere, and then he grabbed someone from the room and just took them off. Big machete in his hand. And I can remember that was a trauma, you know. I think the trauma in it was not that something big and horrible just happened, just that I was in an environment where I couldn't process what had just happened with anyone else in the room, because it wasn't the correct environment to say, my God, that was scary. I feel really, really shaken up and unwell with what just happened, because people were just there and they just got on with smoking their crack and doing their gear. So I left there kind of learning something new, like, you're going to have to deal with this shit on your own. You've chosen this path. Who are you going to cry to? And that was a kind of formative part of my journey in a way, because this man was out to kill someone, and I don't actually know if he did or not, but that was that was scary, man. Really, really scary.
Yeah. And then kind of bringing it all together, really, in terms of like you recently kind of you go through your troubles, you know, and you're very open about that. What's the value in you know, there's some people who kind of have that secretive and have it kind of keep it discreet. And you know what you said when you very early on, when you were entering treatment, what's the true value for you and able to be so open in terms of like your own journey?
Yeah, I think it's kind of twofold in a way, if not threefold, really. That it has a huge emancipatory effect on me as a person, and actually the kind of research that I'm hoping to do, if I get the funding, is around that, and how disclosure done with peer support in a managed way, looking at the positives, the cost benefit analysis of it, can be right up there with among the most useful interventions that you could do with someone. Disclosing what's going on, it's like coming out for a gay person, actually. You know, if you talk to gay people about when they came out, it has this launch pad effect of them coming into a new part of their lives. And I think if you talk to, and it's what step one's about in a lot of ways, isn't it? In the 12 steps, my name's Luke, I'm a drug addict, that has some power in it. And it definitely did for me. And I think that it's above the most useful things that you can do with some people. It's not right for everyone, definitely not right for everyone. Some people will weigh up the cost benefit of it and be like, no, you know, I'd rather not, and that's fine. But I do notice that people that are able to be out and proud about what's happened to them no longer live in secrecy, no longer live in the shadows, no longer feel like the wills of other people could just topple them at any time. They get some esteem. And then there's the fact about making recovery visible in the community is incredibly important to break stigma, to kind of help people from suffering with self-stigma and shame and things like that, to show that there are people in the community who are recovering, and especially in a place like a university campus, the effect that that can have. Oh my God, there are people that used to use like me, but now they've found a new way of life. They're happy, they're healthy, they're better than well. They're having a great time of their education and their life. So I wouldn't say it's incumbent upon every addict to go out there and have a coming out party or some kind of launching it on the world, but I hope to kind of prove with some research that it has really demonstrable effects and can really, really help people, and just open up conversations where there haven't been conversations before in diverse areas. Some parts of our society, it's good, within certain kind of sectors. Some healthcare settings are getting a lot better. The criminal justice world's getting, there's good people out there talking about recovery and, harm reduction and all of that. But we need to just keep on with that project and opening up.
Especially with if you look at a lot of the cities, especially in the UK, becoming more diverse in the communities, and they're having active people within those circles to kind of champion and having those conversations.
Definitely.
I mean, you've got it kind of double folded, really, in terms of like your family support network. Especially like with Jess, for example. She's obviously first and foremost like your sister, but also a massive advocate in trying to push forward the addiction, the drug and alcohol agenda to try and get that on there. How do you kind of manage that relationship when you're trying to, you've got your own kind of personal experience and having that obligation there as a family, or first and foremost, and you're still not rowing over Christmas, are you?
No, there was a period, and Jess was probably of the most unforgiving people. As part of the 12-step process, I did the amends part of the process, and sometimes people will just say things like, oh, it was in the past, as long as you're doing well now, just keep on doing well. Whereas, Jess, and she didn't let me off the hook at all. She was like, you made my life a misery. I couldn't sleep for however many years. And, she didn't let me off the hook. And it took her a while. And that's because when you really do have a strong relationship with people and you love them and you're very close, you get affected by what they do. And it was, I think of all the people, it was very difficult for Jess to trust me again. She'd done that many times. It had been thrown back in her face. She'd taken me into her home. I stole stuff from the home, or all sorts of things have gone on there. But today, we're close, we're good friends again. The damage will never be undone, a lot of it. But we are very close. We don't row at Christmas. We're very close to each other. We've got a very similar kind of interests, and she wants me to stand on my own feet first and foremost. So she won't do, if you expect that she would do kind of like favors for me professionally or politically, forget about it, man. I'm the last person. She's more likely to help you, Ricky.
No, hey, look, we did a podcast earlier on. I only asked her once, and she said, "Yeah, not a problem, Rick." Not, and she was chilling on her bed doing the podcast. So it was. I've got a lot of love for her. She's helped me quite a lot. So Luke, I'm going to kind of bring it all together. So we know where you are now. You're doing this fantastic project, building upon the research, and getting people involved. And so before I kind of, how do people get involved in this project at the moment? How can they kind of reach out to you for support?
Yeah, so I mean, we're mainly for students at the University of Birmingham. So if you are, or if you know anyone who is in recovery, or perhaps moving towards recovery, or wants to be in recovery, family members, friends of family, neighbours, then we are the Better Than Well service. You can find us on Twitter Twitter handle is BTW_UOB. Where does it go out, Ricky? Is there
Yeah, so this it goes out on kind of audio, Spotify, all the different platforms. But the biggest kind of interaction I have is still in the UK, but it's like USA, Canada, India, wherever, man. I've had people from Romania. I've had loads, weird places, man.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, the way we're also on the website, on the University of Birmingham website. In terms of just getting involved, talk if you are at university. Not even if you're in recovery, if you're interested in kind of justice for people who've had addictions and you feel like they should be represented, then talk to your university administration, welfare team, even up to the Vice Chancellor's office about not only recovery, but harm reduction on your university campuses. Let's get the conversation going.
Definitely. Luke, so this is the Bhandwagon, and what I do is I offer this kind of chance for the guests to either jump on a bandwagon or jump off a bandwagon or just generally get anything off their chest. Is there anything that you would like to share with us today?
What I would like to say is that the harm reduction world and the recovery world can often seem like they are at odds with one another. There seems to be a kind of false dichotomy of a kind of war going on. I am an absolute believer that we need both. I know that you have harm reduction listeners and recovery listeners, so it's reaching out an arm across that. I really hope that we can start to work together better. So I guess the bandwagon I would be jumping off would be recovery is the only answer. Bandwagon.
Can I just say, you're the first person in 40 episodes to actually jump off a bandwagon. That is brilliant.
I'm good at jumping off stuff, mate.
Luke, it's been an absolute pleasure. So we'll pick up this conversation when you're at the next stage of the project, and then probably bring you in alongside with Ed, really, and we could do a podcast together. So really appreciate it, man. Anything you need from me, of course, doors are always open. I just thank you for my education, man.
Yeah, likewise, man. Likewise, you taught me a lot, man. Taught me a lot at a time when I really needed to learn it,
It's good, man. It's good to see you. I'm so happy to see you. Luke, thank you very much, mate. All the best.
Yes, mate. All the best.